episode 13 of the Going for Broke Outdoors podcast, a podcast by an outdoorsman for other outdoorsmen. I'm your host, Jeremy Gillespie. In today's episode, we catch up with Dan Infalt, a man who needs no introduction. Dan has revolutionized techniques for hunting bedded bucks, mobile hunting tactics, and he's been gracious enough to share his incredible wealth of knowledge with thousands of other hunters via the Hunting Beast forum, which Dan founded. Dan also co-founded huntingbeastgear.com, a company that develops and produces mobile hunting gear specifically designed for mobile hunters. I personally owe nearly all my bow hunting success since 2014 to the lessons I've learned from Dan and the other members on the Hunting Beast forum. In this podcast, we discuss early season tactics. Specifically, Dan and I discuss common features of early season bedding areas, if hunting field edges is ever the correct play, early season food sources, hot weather hunting and its effects on buck movement, early season rubs and scrapes, and how Dan uses that intel, trail camera strategies, and tactics to attack new terrain or new states during the early season. I want to start out today's podcast with an important public service announcement. Today is August 26, 2021, and I have had the unfortunate pleasure of dealing with a taxidermist here in Montana for the past 21 months that is possibly the most unethical business person I have ever dealt with. I want to save you guys that are listening from ever enduring this experience. The taxidermist's name is Don Keever. That's Donkeever. And his taxidermy shop name is Antlers and Anglers Taxidermy. And it's located at 2905 Grelk Lane in Billings, Montana. I'd like everyone that's listening to pull out your phone right now and enter this phone number, 406-855-7655. That's 406-855-7655. And I want you to title that contact in your phone, Do Not Use Ever. Let me elaborate on the reasons why you as a hunter who values his time and his money should never use Antlers and Anglers Taxidermy Shop. I'll try to keep this short, but please bear with me. I dropped off my largest whitetail buck to date in November of 2019 to Antlers and Anglers Taxidermy. This was a 141-inch deer with a 22-inch neck. I explicitly stated to Don that turnaround time and honesty were important considerations when selecting a taxidermist. Don stated at this time that his average turnaround time was 12 months. When I pressed him for the absolute worst case scenario, he told me 18 months. That was the absolute worst case. These are his words, not mine. When I dropped off the deer, I paid Don his requested deposit of $400 on what was a total price of $595 for the completed mount. The following year, in September of 2020, I shot a 10-point whitetail buck in Montana. Since 12 months had not elapsed since I took Don the first buck, I took him this buck to be mounted as well. In October of 2020, I also shot a pronghorn in Montana, and I took that to Don to be mounted as well. I paid Don the $400 deposit for each mount, totaling $1,200 total for all three mounts. November of 2020, 12 months after I initially dropped off the first mount, I called Don for the first time to get a status update on the progress of the initial deer that I dropped off. Don stated that the tannery he used, which he told me is named the Wildlife Gallery Tannery located in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, was running behind due to COVID-19 and that it would be 2 or 3 more months before my mount was completed. Fast forward 3 months to February 2021, a full 15 months after I initially dropped the deer off. I called Don for a second time to inquire about the progress of my deer mount. Don told me, almost verbatim, the same story that the Wildlife Gallery Tannery had not returned 2019 capes yet, and that it would be another 2 to 3 months before my mount would be completed. Fast forward 3 months to May of 2021, a full 18 months after dropping off the first deer. I called Don for a third time for a status update, and he told me again, surprise, almost verbatim, the same story that it would be 2 to 3 more months. At this point, Don had exceeded what were in his words his initially promised worst-case scenario of 18 months. I informed him in May of 2021 that I'd be coming to a shop to pick up my 3 skull plates and my capes. Don stated that my initial whitetail cape from 2019 had finally came back from the tannery, but my antelope cape and my other deer cape were still not back. On May 6, 2021, I traveled to Don's shop and retrieved my 3 skull plates and 1 whitetail cape. The cape was in a bag labeled number 975, which was the invoice number. My skull plate was also labeled number 975. I took the cape and the skull plate to a much more reputable taxidermist based out of my original home state of Michigan. After I dropped off that cape and my skull plate, the taxidermist in Michigan informed me that the cape I received from Don measured only 19 inches, Now, if you recall earlier in the story, the deer that I shot had a neck measurement of 22 inches. This was clearly not my original cape. Not once during any of our interactions did Don ever indicate I would not receive my original cape. When I confronted him, he stated that my cape had been damaged by bugs beyond repair while at the tannery. Now, who knows what the truth is, but two facts are certain. First, I did not receive my original cape back. Second, Don only disclosed that I received a much smaller replacement cape after I called him out on it. He never offered to discount my taxidermy work or offer me any refund. When I picked up my skull plates and cape, I asked Don for a partial refund because he had done no work on my initial whitetail buck. I brought that cape to him, skinned, face and all, and I had never received that cape back as just mentioned. On my second whitetail buck, he skinned the faces of the whitetail buck and the antelope and sent the hides out for tanning. I asked Don for $600 of my $1,200 deposit back, which seemed more than fair to me considering he had done basically no work. Don refused to give me a single cent back. Not only did he try and pass off an inferior whitetail cape that was never mine to begin with and not complete any work, he also charged me $1,200 to do that. One final point. You might be thinking to yourself, hey, maybe the Wildlife Gallery Tannery in Mount Pleasant, Michigan is that far behind. Well, I want to tell you, I know for a fact they are not. How do I know this, you might ask? Because the taxidermist I took my 2019 buck to after getting it back from Don uses the exact same tannery. In fact, I shot a whitetail buck in November of 2020 in Kansas. My taxidermist in Michigan received the cape back in April of 2021, only 5 months later. Again, I want to reiterate that today is August 26, 2021, and I have still not received my whitetail or antelope capes from 2020 back from Don. Although he claims that my antelope cape has now been delivered to a shop, I have a hard time believing that this is even my cape after what has happened to date. Bottom line, avoid Antlers and Anglers Taxidermy at 2905 Groke Lane in Billings, Montana. Again, put this number in your phone as do not ever use. That's Don Keever at 406-855-7655. I'd encourage you to tell any friends that might ever travel to Montana to do the same. For anyone that might doubt the veracity of my story, I have almost the entire history of events in text message. If anyone would like to see those messages to corroborate this story and the facts of, please feel free to contact me. One last time, beware Antlers and Anglers Taxidermy in Billings, Montana, and Don Keever. Guys, if you haven't already stopped by Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to outfit your mobile hunting setup with some silencing gear, you're missing out. The hunting season is fast approaching, and the time to upgrade your mobile hunting setup is now. There's not a better product on the market for eliminating unwanted noise. Stealth Outdoors manufactures an incredibly durable product for a great value. Designed from the ground up with the mobile hunter in mind, Stealth Outdoors manufactures climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, and stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Head on over to www.stealthoutdoors.com to place your order. Today's podcast is brought to you by Backwoods Mobile Gear at www.backwoodsmobilegear.com. Backwoods Mobile Gear produces an array of products to completely customize your mobile hunting setup. Backwoods Mobile Gear's product line includes climbing aiders like their multi-step aider and Versa aider. Climb higher using the same amount of climbing sticks with the climbing aiders at a fraction of the weight of an additional climbing stick. Backwoods Mobile Gear also offers a variety of AmSteel rope solutions from daisy chains for climbing sticks to AmSteel gear hangers. Replace those bulky straps and hunt-ruining metal cam buckles with buckleless and lightweight AmSteel products from Backwoods Mobile Gear. Check out Backwoods Mobile Gear at www.backwoodsmobilegear.com if you want your setup to be lighter, to take you higher, and to keep your gear tighter. Guys, what do you get when you combine a prototype machinist who also happens to be a big buck serial killer named Dan Infalt with state-of-the-art manufacturing techniques, the highest quality materials, and innovative designs that have been engineered, field-tested, and refined to perfection by a group of the best mobile hunters on the planet? You get HuntingBeastGear.com. HuntingBeastGear.com delivers cutting-edge products including beast gear, climbing sticks, optimized with weight reduction holes, non-staggered inline stacking, and double steps, all in a 2.2-pound package, including the fastening strap. And new for the 2021 season, HuntingBeastGear.com has released the game-changing Beast Gear Hang-On Tree Stand. Designed from the ground up to be the ultimate hang-on solution, with 4 years of prototyping, testing, and refinement, the Beast Gear stand features a 16-inch wide by 29-inch long platform and comes in at an incredible 6.8 pounds without compromising strength or durability. The Beast Gear stand is finished with a durable anodized coating and features grade 8 hardware, high-quality Delrin washers, Beast buttons, and adjustment knobs. For more details and to place your order, head on over to www.huntingbeastgear.com. Now, on to the podcast. So, Dan, how's it going today?
Good. How you doing?
Can't complain. First off, I want to thank you for calling in today. I know you're an extremely busy guy, and I definitely appreciate you carving out some time to answer my questions. And I also know everyone that follows you and listens to this podcast will appreciate it too. So thanks again, Dan.
Yeah, no problem.
So on our last podcast episode where you joined me, we covered a lot of topics, but today I want to have a discussion centered completely on early season tactics. But before we get started on that, I actually have a few questions on what I'm going to call Dan Infalt current events. And I want to start out with, Dan, you recently went to Deerfest in West Bend, Wisconsin. I wasn't able to make it to the show, so I was hoping you could give me a quick recap of your show experience and how the Hunting Beast gear stand and Hunting Beast gear in general was received at the show.
Oh, it was overwhelming. It was great. The show itself actually kind of sucked. They didn't advertise it real well. They didn't have any big names there. And I think a lot of that had to do with they were questioning what was going on with COVID, so they didn't spend a lot of money on it. I think next year would be a much better show again. It'll come back around. But it was low numbers, but even with it being low numbers, the majority of the crowd was by us and by Tethered. And then it was just like a trickle crowd everywhere else. So it was kind of cool to see that we were well received. But I mean, it's my backyard too, so most people in this vicinity know who I am and like to come over and chat and see the equipment and stuff. It was cool. We put the stand on display. We let people climb in a tree and let them look at them all they wanted. And I just really didn't sell anything. I just let the guys do that, and I stood around talking and just meeting people, which is what I like to do.
I was going to say, that sounds like a lot more fun than selling.
Right. Yeah, we sold way more than we thought we would.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we pretty much sold out everything that we had reserved for the show, and actually sold ahead a bit. So now we got to work our butts off to catch back up. It's one of those items where you got to get it in your hands to really appreciate it. You know, guys, they hear about it, they see it, they don't really know. But when they touch it, feel it, and see how it works, then they're really excited.
It's a lot of the feedback I've been seeing online is the same thing. Like, was pretty excited about it, and then people get it in delivered, start to use it, and then they really love it.
Yeah, our competition cut the length of the stand down real short, and cut the post down real short to get the lightest weight, and that's one bullet point. You need a whole package. I mean, we didn't want to have the lightest stand. We just wanted to have a light stand that was great. So you got to have enough room that you can turn around and shoot behind the tree. You got to have enough room that when you're sitting down, you can stand up easily, and that it's not uncomfortable, that your knees aren't in your chin. And I think we've accomplished all of that. And that's why it took us so long to produce the final product. We made sure it was perfect.
Yeah, obviously you guys spent a lot of time on R&D and prototyping. I've followed along and saw you went through several iterations and a lot of testing in the field before you released the final product. So I ought to give people a lot of reassurance and that. And you guys went through TMA as well, correct?
Yeah, we got all the testing done for TMA, and we're in the process of certification, but all the testing came back positive.
That's awesome.
We passed everything with flying colors.
Well, speaking of beast gear, I'm actually interested in a stand, but right now I'm kind of on the edge of the weight limit with my boots and my camo and my bow. So I need to drop a few LBs, but that brings me to the next topic. And I've noticed you've been making your health a priority lately. And what inspired that change? How are you progressing? And what are you going to do differently to maintain that change?
Well, number one, my doctor's really been on my ass for couple of years, and it's been getting worse and worse with my weight and and other health concerns around my weight. And really, I think the deciding factor kind of was I want to be a good role model, and if I set my mind to something, I just do it. So I just decided I was going to get back to swim. And I'm really glad I did because I feel a lot better than I thought I would. I feel like a new man. Taking 30 pounds off my back was really something.
Yeah, that's great to hear. What's been the hardest part about adopting a healthier lifestyle? I mean, I know you're busy, right? We kind of opened with that. You're super busy. And I know one of the things that, and I can relate to on and off, is drinking those darn energy drinks. So that's probably comes into play with, being busy and trying to make the most out of your day. What's been the most difficult part for you?
Yeah, with the energy drinks, it bothered me for about 9 days. The sugar intake, that bothered me for about 9 days. Then after the 9 days, it was real easy. But right now I'm going through a struggle because I get to the point where I wasn't hungry anymore. But I knew I wasn't dieting correctly, that I was just trying to rapidly lose weight. So now that I got down to a point, I went to a dietitian and consulted. And it was kind of nice because my company paid me to do it, so might as well take the free money and get the advice. So the dietitian determined that I'd gotten to the point where I was starting to lose muscle, like my body was burning muscle rather than fat, because I'd only eat once a day. But even once a day, I was never hungry anymore. So now I had to go to a small snack in the morning and then eat in the evening and periodically fast. And there's something about when you eat more regular, your hunger comes back and your cravings come back. But it's nothing I can't work through. I just drink a water every time I'm hungry.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a bigger guy as well, so I definitely understand the struggles there. And that's part of the reason I was asking, but the other reason was it's good to see people making positive change in their life. And I'm sure there's plenty of people listening that are looking to do the same thing. So as far as you being a good role model, bravo there.
Well, one thing, for an incentive for the people listening is, this weekend I went up to northern Minnesota, went through the swamps, and I put on 8 or 9 miles in one day on really rough terrain, and not winded at all, not tired or nothing. Where when I was heavier, I would have been winded. You probably saw me winded in a lot of videos.
Yeah, it's hard when you're carrying around the extra pounds for sure, and you don't notice it. I'm kind of in the same process right now, trying to take some weight off because the Western hunting especially, it's never affected me, but I'm getting older. I'm 38 now and starting to slow down a little bit. And with the extra weight, before I could just will my way through it. And this is probably this year, maybe last year was the first year I started noticing it having a negative impact. So time to make a change.
Yeah, good.
Well, moving on from that, maybe one or two other current event topics here. What are the odds we're going to see Dan Infalt involved in the 2021 Public Land Challenge? And if that's a yes, can you give any details, or is that all under wraps still?
I am going to be involved, and Joe's going to be involved again. Other than that, I don't know much other than it's going to fall around rut. So I believe it's going to be a rut challenge.
Well, that'd be exciting because you guys have been hunting some pretty tough times of the year previously. I know you're Michigan early season, which that can be tough. And then you were there in Pennsylvania, the middle of October?
Yeah, it was mid-October. I was getting a little bit of the tinge of the rut is what I was seeing on the Pennsylvania challenge. This one will be full blown.
Well, that'd be exciting to see what a group of killers like you guys can do on public land during the rut. I got high hopes for that.
Sounds like a blast like usual. And we also got our challenge of our own with the beast. We're going to do something. We wanted to do a big woods, no plots, no crops, no problem kind of thing.
Okay.
So we're doing that at end of September. I believe someone's coming from the hunting public, and we got a couple guys from Exodus and a couple smaller filmers coming, and the beast guys.
Well, that'd be awesome.
So it won't be put out like the hunting publics because we don't have the capability of editing it that fast. But we plan on putting it out as soon as we're done. It'll be like a 4-day deal. But it should be pretty fun. We're not disclosing the location. We don't want to get flooded with people. But I think it's going to be a really cool event.
Yeah, you should go back to wherever that bear bait buck was and just shoot that.
I should. I'd like to do a do-over there, but I don't believe he exists anymore.
No, we talked about that a little bit. That's maybe his son's around there, or grandson. Well, Dan, last non-tactic question before we get into the early season tactics. Last year we talked about your bow and your shooting, and you said you're going to make that a priority this year. And I saw recently on social media that you're now shooting a prime bow. So give me your impressions of that and why you made the switch and how you're liking the prime so far.
Before last season, Steve Pagel, the retired owner of Forge Bows, built me a bow as a gift. He didn't even have a bow company anymore, and he built me a custom bow to custom fit me. And I love that bow, but I beat the hell out of it, and it had some damage to it and stuff. And I was going to get it reworked, and Prime approached me, and I liked their company. And talking to them, they kind of have the same kind of ethics and morals that I have. And some of the other big companies have approached me too, and have been approaching me for years. And I've just kind of pushed them off because I don't like the way they manage their businesses. So, you can kill a deer with any bow out there, literally. I mean, you can make any bow shoot really well. I mean, people are doing it with stick and string, right?
Yep.
They're doing it with long bows. But for me, it's important to work with a good company if I'm going to get something, because I'm trying to set an example. And I really like Prime and the people. And the bow shot really well for me. I told them if I was going to shoot one of their bows, I wanted a long one. I didn't make many guarantees, but they flew all the way out here, let me try them out, and they shot very well for me. I mean, right out of the box, when they set it for me, I had 3 arrows touching at 20 yards, which is better than I ever did with the Forge.
Yeah, hard to argue with those kind of results.
Yeah, they got something going where they got 2 cams on the top, 2 cams on the bottom, and the string splits. And it kind of keeps you from twisting your wrist, kind of like when you spin a bow tire a bicycle tire, and you try to turn it. So it kind of locks on target a little better, I think. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. It's kind of cool, and I've been shooting the hell out of it, and I'm shooting really well. So I'm excited to try it. There aren't too many companies that still make those long axle to axle bows, and that's kind of what I like.
Yeah, you're a taller guy, so that probably fits you a lot better.
Yeah, and I'm 6'1", but my arms match a 12-foot guy. My knuckles drag on the ground. I think I'm part caveman or something.
Well, last thing here, Dan, I feel like I'm the big brother among my group of hunting friends, and I'm always reminding these guys, get your bows out, practice. So I'm going to big brother you right now, and we have a few weeks left before Wisconsin opener, and I know you're busy. We've talked about that. This will be the 3rd time, but I want to challenge you on the podcast today to shoot your bow at least 3 times a week until the opener. What do you say?
Absolutely. I'll do it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. I know it's hard to make some things a priority, but it sounds like you're making some positive changes around the health and the diet, and I want to see arrows sticking out of big bucks this year.
Yeah, that sounds great. An added incentive is that, I wear my life on my sleeve. I'm in everybody's eyes. So I can't just not tell anybody when I shoot something or wound something. So I'm honest about that. And I really don't want to deal with the wrath, because I'd feel bad about the deer and about what people are saying. So for me, that makes it more of a priority to really keep on target and keep shooting,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's talk about some early season tactics, since that's just right around the corner. And I want to frame today's discussion in the context of September 1st through October 15th. Now, I know Wisconsin doesn't open quite as early as September 1st, but you guys, what's your actual opener? It's like the second week or second Saturday of Wisconsin? I
believe this year it's going to be a little later. I think it's the 18th.
Okay.
I think it's the 3rd Saturday or something like that.
Is that how they set the date?
I forget how they rationalize it. Yeah, it's some number of Saturdays. I think it's the 3rd one. I mean, occasionally it falls as early as like the 10th or something. This year it's the 18th, I believe.
Now, I'm in Montana now, and they do the first Saturday, so same thing. It could be September 1st or as late as the 7th, so it just varies. Well, I know your early season starts with the postseason scouting, and I'd like you to describe some of the most common features that you think make a specific bedding area a great early season bedroom. And what have you noticed throughout the years that these early season beds have in common? Is it, crops, mast, pressure, all those, something else? What's a great early season setup for you?
Early season bedding is usually close to food. It's usually in a cool, dark area or a low wet area. Um, like acorns are huge for me. If you got acorns, it's pretty easy to figure out where deer will be off of swamp islands. That can be almost as good as a rut if you know what you're doing, and nobody really takes advantage of it. You don't see hardly anybody out there when it's 80 degrees. And I'll be seeing deer at like 1 or 2 in the afternoon already. But they bed really close to food. And people who struggle with early season are usually using rut tactics or something, and they're hunting at the food source or too far back. And another big tragic mistake is guys will see them on the beans and they'll glass them on beans all summer, and right about the week before the opener, the beans start to yellow and the bucks go to a different food source. The one good thing is that the bedding comes back around to those spots again every year, same areas. So sometimes it takes you a year or two to learn how deer use a certain area in the early season, but they repeat themselves.
So 2 follow-up questions there. And this is something I noticed. So I don't have a lot of experience hunting in September. I lived in Michigan most of my life, and they have an October 1st opener every year. So now in Montana, I can hunt a whole month earlier, and the pressure is a lot lower. So my first couple of hunts, early September, both of the last 2 years, I've seen like pretty good bucks up and moving early. I mean, like 3, 4, 5 o'clock, super early. So that's one thing that I heard you say, seeing deer at 1 or 2. I noticed that too. And then the second thing I wanted to discuss is you said, and I've seen this too, deer bedding extremely close to crops. So how do you approach a hunt like that? Let's say, as a hypothetical, you've located a shooter buck, it's close to the crops, and your access is difficult. What are you doing, or how are you ensuring that you can get in there? Because you probably only have 1, maybe 2 chances, right, on an early season before that pattern's gone. So what are you doing to maximize your chances there?
Yeah, you got to act pretty quick. So for me, if I've observed that buck, I try to keep observing him from a distance. And what I'll do is not just look at the buck and go, cool, a shooter. I'm trying to determine where is he moving, why is he moving there, because they've usually got a specific location they're going to. They don't just come out of bedding and wander out into an open field and feed. If you watch, they seem to go to the same areas over and over again. I mean, obviously it varies, or hunting would be easy, right?
Right.
But you'll see that there's a certain spot in the crop field they like to make it to, whether it's better fertilized or what. And I'm going to look for some vulnerable way he's traveling that I can kill him. I want to look at the slope of the land, how's the thermals going. I'm going to do all this while I'm watching that deer. I think a lot of amateurs just stare at the deer and they're like, I got to get a picture. I got to, I got to text my friends, where I'm concentrating on what that deer is doing and where is my opportunity to kill it. So that's where I shine at that. So I'll look at some way to sneak in there. How can I use the terrain? How can I use the landscape? And generally, there's some way. Obviously, there's risks involved, and some places are easier to kill one than others based on the terrain and stuff. And sometimes you screw up, sometimes you don't. But you just take your best shot, and you don't put all your eggs in that one basket. Unless it's a world record or something. You get your pattern down, but you don't just sit there every single day looking. You're also looking for other bucks. You're trying to develop other patterns. You're trying to, get that down and have a path in to kill another one too.
Yeah, it's good to have a plan B, plan C.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, everybody who looks at my wall of bucks thinks I go out and shoot a deer anytime I want. But generally, I put in a lot of days going after these deer. And every one of my sits, I really believe that I'm going to kill a big buck. How many of them do I kill? I don't kill one every time I go out. I do 80, 90 sits in a year and maybe shoot 1 or 2 bucks. So it's really about, you got to keep doing those high percentage hunts. A lot of guys that are just starting out are just getting mobile and stuff. They'll see that one buck and they think, I got this thing. They're already picking up the spot in their wall. And they're not prioritizing that things go wrong and that deer didn't get to be 5 years old by being stupid. He might look stupid walking in that field every day. But he's not.
Yeah.
Like one thing I notice is they'll go to the lowest spot in the field and they come out right in the evening and your amateur is going to look at the wind direction. But that low spot, the reason he's coming out there is because he's coming out at the calm when all the thermals are dropping and he's winding the whole field from every direction because the thermals are dropping down there. So you have to have the thermals in mind, and you're not going to beat him. So you have to look at where he goes to and how you can set up on that outside of those thermals.
I can certainly attest to early in my hunting career, only thinking about wind direction and having it die off time after time after time at prime time. And then, like you said, that's when the thermals kick in, and that's usually right when the buck comes out.
Right.
One of the other things that I really like about you and your hunting style, it's something that has drawn me and kept me coming back to the beast, is you're extremely adaptable, and you'll probably use any tactic that you think will work. So with that said, it's kind of taboo in the hunting beast, but can you give me an example or conditions where you might hunt a field edge in the early season and think that would be the right move?
If I see a deer coming into that field, I'll do what the deer do. You know what I mean? I might not. I might say you're going to kill more bucks by, getting between that field edge and the beds or something. But a lot of times they bed right on the edge of a field too. So how do you get in between that? So I will sit on the edge of a field if I'm watching a deer enter that field, and I can think of a few cases, especially in Iowa, where I've done just that. I can remember putting a trail camera in the field, and it was to monitor night activity to see if there was deer in the bedding areas adjacent. But when I checked the camera, 5 days in a row, the same buck is standing there an hour before dark in front of the camera. I mean, only an idiot would then go hunt in the woods where he's coming from.
Right.
He's coming there in daylight, and the thermals work and the wind works. Why not just sit there and shoot him? And I did. So, I mean, it's not like locked in rules. There's nothing that's absolute in deer hunting. Anybody who says the word always when they're talking about deer has a screw loose.
Yeah.
There are no always. There's just percentages, And for me, it's about like reducing the percentage that something can fail as much as possible. Narrowing that down. And it's just basically common sense.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that was, twofold. The first is, like you said, that a lot of times they're bedding real close to the field, so maybe you can't even get in the woods. And two, you kind of alluded to it with Iowa's circumstances are different, and you don't always have highly pressured, pounded public land. Even if it is public land, it might not be super highly pressured or pounded. So,
right, even the pressured stuff in Iowa is different because, like where I was hunting was real open terrain with small woodlots, and there's not much bow hunting, and most people hunt with a gun, and those deer have learned they're hunting with shotguns that their best spot is to bed out in an open field or on a tree edge where they can see everything. So they're watching you from a distance. That's where glassing comes in handy, because if you figure out where they're bedding and how they're watching a field or something, you can figure out, well, where can't they see and where can you get to,
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things maybe I want to emphasize and kind of just thought about it is you do a great job on the website and all the guys on the forum of presenting the tactics and how they work. But I think something that we don't always talk about, and you've talked about it like implied a lot, but people need to put on their thinking caps, right? These are the tactics, but you have to recognize the situation and still apply the right tactic or use your brain. It's not one size fits all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about food sources. And you kind of alluded to this early, beans yellowing and talking about sitting acorns on islands. So we're talking early season, again, September to mid-October. Give me your 3 or 4 favorite early season food sources, and ideal setup would be in relation to bedding with those type of food sources.
Clovers, acorns, alfalfa, and there's a lot of plants that grow in the woods too that I recognize that deer like. But a lot of that's just found through scouting. One thing I like to do in early season, if I don't have one glassed up, which is kind of hard around my place nowadays because there's so many people doing it, especially on public. But I like to just spot check spots, and I don't really worry about what the food is. They're eating something. Because a lot of times I don't even know what it is. It's just some plant that they're liking at that time. And there's a lot of green plants for them to choose from in early season. So I'll just go in and look at an area, check it out, see if there's some sign going into it. If there is, then I'll investigate a little further. If there's not, if I get in there, I don't see much sign right away, I turn around and go to another wood lot. And I found the more times I do that, the more often I just run into something really hot and set up on it and get action immediately. I'm trying to think of the name of the plant, but there's that one plant that's got that orange flower. We've talked about it on the Beast a little bit.
Jewelweed. Yeah, we talked about it. Orange jewelweed.
Yeah, that stuff's on fire in September. Deer love that.
Yeah, that's a good tip there.
And you can find that in cool, shady places, and it's not usually down low, real close to bedding areas, you know?
First snack out of the bed?
Yeah. A lot of times those older bucks in real heavy pressure areas like where I live, or a lot of Michigan, like where you're from, they don't hit those fields even in early season in daylight. You know, they just hold back, you know?
Right.
It takes that aggressive move or finding that first food source in order to kill them.
So you're still doing boots on the ground scouting then. Typically, when is that? Let's say, just for the sake of this discussion, your opener is going to be September 15th. When are you doing those spot checks to look for that browse and those clues, you know, boots on the ground?
Day one. I don't usually do it too much earlier than that because you go in there and you spot check and then you come back during the season and they move because they smelled you. I mean, nobody's been in there all year. So I'm going into these spots and trying to beat anybody else in there, and when I find a sign, I want to hunt that day.
Okay, no, that's a great tip because I think a lot of guys, and myself, before you said that answer, I would have thought maybe you're getting in there a week, 10 days, 2 weeks early, but you're waiting and trying to keep the area pristine before you move in and just move in as soon as the hunting season opens then.
Yep. It's hard, too, for a working guy. I mean, when you get out of work, you have only so much time. And if you get into the routine of just going from spot to spot after work or on the weekends, you know, you don't get that hot action. Every now and then you get in there in one of those places that's hot. But when you find that hot sign, it's really good. Another thing I do is, like, I might have a destination, but I scout my way in. So I don't walk the beaten trail. As a matter of fact, I very rarely take the, like, trail back to where I'm hunting. I'll figure out a route where the wind is correct for edge, and I'll follow that transition line back and just try to run into something hot. And I've killed a lot of deer doing that.
Yeah. Results speak for themselves, right? Shifting gears here a little bit. When you've located a shooter buck, whether that's via shining or trail cameras, observation stands, and now I'm talking about preseason again now, so before you're doing the boots on the ground stuff, what are the odds, you know, over your 30-some years of hunting experience, what are the odds that a deer, a shooter buck, will stay on that pattern? Let's say you find him, you know, in August or early September. What are the odds he's going to stay on that pattern when the season opens?
Probably about, I don't know, maybe 1 in 10.
Okay. So
it's not very good, but generally they're still in the area. You know, I've had them where you watch them all summer and then you go in there opening day and you shoot them and it's kind of like, well, okay. You know, it's not the most exciting hunt that worked. But most of the time I go in there, it doesn't work, and then you got to shift, and or they start shifting and you kind of lose them right before season. Then you got to go in there and you move. And I've always said if we open September 1st, I'd kill a hell of a lot more deer because it's usually right before the season that the shift is. And it has nothing to do with pressure. It has to do with timing. There's something about that time period when their antlers start hardening and stuff that they just start shifting. And sometimes, you know, you can get on them. And I know that there's been a few times when we've opened real early, like the 10th or something. And I always have way better odds than early season when we open early. There's a change in the deer based on timing. And that September 1st opener, those states that have that, man, that's a draw because those bucks are a lot easier to kill in that first week of September.
That's what I've been finding too. I couldn't believe the amount of bucks that I've been seeing in daylight early September on their feet. It's very surprising coming from an October opener and a much higher pressure state. It's been a game changer for sure. Right.
That's what I always laugh when people from Michigan will tell me there's no such thing as an October lull, and I say, well, you know, that's because you haven't hunted September. If you hunted early September and you hunted rut, and you'd say, yeah, there's a early October lull.
Yeah, big difference for sure for me from October 1st to September. Well, it's not always the first, but the first week of September.
Right. Another big thing about early season is your odds are lower for numbers of bucks, seeing numbers of bucks, than say the rut, right?
Sure.
However, if you go back and you look at my wall, if you take all the good deer off of it, and you just take the top 10 oldest bucks, I've shot more of them in early season than I have during the rut.
Well, I should tell people listening something right there.
Yeah, because those old bucks do not run around in the rut stupid. They're smart and they've been hunted and now they know it's game on. But in early season, they do walk around in daylight. They do move in daylight. And I've killed more actual mature bucks when you get to that like 5 or 6 years old in the first week of the season than I have in the week of rut.
That's my plan for this year. Hopefully we'll see. So the early season, we talked about this a little bit, but the weather. So even in Michigan, early September, I'd see a lot of bucks in daylight when it's hot out, hot weather. So give me your opinion on how much the weather influences early season hunting, and when do you think that there's a shift where obviously they start to grow winter coat and the temperature starts to matter and the pressure, but what do you think that's been like in your experience?
I don't know how to answer that other than you're going to have a lot of guys that'll tell you never hunt when it's hot. There'll be a lot of guys that say deer won't move when it's rain. There'll be guys that say they don't move when it's windy. But the truth of the matter is they move all the time, and you just got to use your advantage of what you get out of the weather. Like when it's hot, they're going to be near water. They're going to move right in that last half an hour. I actually see on a real hot day, right when that sun goes down, you get that drop in temperature. After they've been sitting there in that heat all day, they jump up and they're moving around. And it goes against what everybody says, but I see it all the time.
No, it makes sense. And if you're seeing it, then it's hard to argue with observation firsthand. That's my favorite source of intel.
You know, a lot of it is, you know, when you talk to people and you read articles and stuff, they tell you what they believe. They don't tell you what they actually seen. And I try to base everything that I hunt based on observations, not on what people told me or what I read or things like that. I try to do it on what I see. And I think that makes you a better hunter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Another early season topic that this one doesn't get discussed a lot, but I know from being well acquainted with your stories of shooting early season bucks over scrapes, that's possible. And you're finding some of these scrapes already active and open, ground pod and everything in September. So I'd like you to talk about your experiences with early season bucks over scrapes and kind of like the whole setup. Where are those scrapes in relation to bedding and food, and what were your setups like?
Yeah, whenever I've killed a big buck over a scrape in early season, the scrape's usually been within 100 yards of a couple of bedding areas, and both are active with good bucks. And they're both competing with each other, and they go to that scrape, and they both work it every evening. They kind of like race to it. It's not too often you find that situation. You got to really be searching for it. But I have found it on a few occasions and had some real good success with it. My two biggest bull bucks were shot on scrapes early season, within 100 yards of the bedding area. And in both cases, multiple bucks were using that scrape in September. You know, so if you find a scrape within 100 yards of bedding in September, I would say you should probably try to throw a stand over the top of it. But you want to do it the day you find it. So both of my biggest bucks that I shot over scrapes, I never went near the scrape. I glassed them. I watched them from a distance go to the scrape in the evenings. And there was always multiple bucks, and there'd be one I'd want to shoot. But anytime I've walked in there and hunted and tried it, it's kind of gone dead after that. You know, you get your one crack, basically.
Yeah, so the only reason I knew about this, and this happened to me last year, is from reading your stories. So again, thanks. You taught me a ton. And I was kind of stumbling my way through a new piece of property, and I ran into a scrape, and it was fresh. And this was either the first or second weekend in September, like a fresh twisted licking branch. The ground was pawed and everything. And then about as soon as I saw the scrape, I jumped like 8 bucks out of an oxbow that were all bedded in there.
Yep.
I set up my stand that night and ended up killing a nice whitetail buck. So I was pretty pumped about that.
Nice.
Yeah, so that worked out. I think it is rare. And actually, I haven't hardly seen many scrapes at all in Montana. But that one, it was exactly like you described. There are multiple bucks, and the scrape was within probably 100, 150 yards of the bedding area. And now that I know that, I might very likely try that spot again this year. But knowing where it is and knowing where the bedding area is, I'll have a much better access plan this year, and hopefully I won't spook them like I did last year. And I just got lucky and ended up working out though.
Great.
And then one other thing, Dan, I want to talk about this too, because I have some friends that I know this has happened to them specifically. You talked about multiple bucks using an area early season, and I know everybody's familiar with the concept of bachelor group. So how do you know, or what do you do if you expect multiple bucks in an area? And I've read some of your stories about you passing like 130, 140 class deer early season because you know there's a bigger one in there. I guess, how did you mature enough to do that, and what's that like for you?
There's something in you that makes you really want to shoot a good buck when it's in front of you. But I mean, if you know there's a real big one around and you hold out, after that buck goes by, after you pass one like that, you feel really good about letting it go. Like it's almost like you shot one because you get this feeling of you're proud that you did it. You know what I mean? And then after that, it starts getting a lot easier. You know, there's nothing wrong with shooting a deer if you want to. If you don't want to, and shooting a smaller one later, you get the whole season going in front of you. You know, and if you think you got a chance at the big one, hold up for the big one. If it don't happen later on, maybe you get a chance at the other one again. You know.
I mean, at least for me, this has been an early season specific phenomenon because during the rut or the pre-rut, more often than not, it's one buck. Sometimes you see multiple, but usually it's just one buck that comes through. But in the early season, on several occasions, I've had, 2, 3, 4-year-old, 2-year-old bucks, and then a 3-year-old buck come in behind all of those that if I would have shot one of those 2-year-old bucks, I would have never saw that one to begin with.
Right.
I guess I'm targeting this comment towards people that don't have a lot of early season experience or new hunters, that if you're trying to shoot something a little bit bigger, then sometimes it's worth the gamble because that bigger buck might be at the tail end of the train. Usually is, right?
Right. And, if you're hunting 2-year-olds, that's what you're going to pretty much get. A lot easier to get a 2-year-old than it is to get a 3 or 4. Every year they got a more advanced way about them.
So one last thing on scrapes here. And before I ask this question, I want to preface it with, I've got absolutely no intention of stirring anything up in case anyone's listening to this, but I had John Eberhard on the podcast a few episodes ago, and obviously John's killed a lot of deer. He's killed a lot of his better bucks over scrapes, and he thinks or believes that scrapes are always placed in areas of high doe traffic. So 2 questions here. First, do you believe that? Why or why not? And then the second question is, and this might be the why not, is do you think a scrape like we were just talking about in early September or mid-September is different than a scrape you might find in late October or early November?
Well, I think scrapes, a lot like rubs, are tools for communication, and they're not always meant for does. Now, obviously, the ones that I was watching in September, I've never seen a doe on them. The ones that I shot those big bucks on, I just saw bucks, buck after buck after buck come out of the bedding areas. There's just not a doe bedding area anywhere around. There's no reason for a doe to even be in there because there's no food in there for them. It's a secure bedding area, and the bucks come out and they're marking that, and it's pretty obvious to me they're marking it for other bucks. There's some sort of communication between those bucks. I mean, they're not highly aggressive or anything. They might spar or something like that if they see each other, but it's not real aggressive. But they'll come out and they'll work that scrape, and there's kind of a dominance they're establishing. And that scrape at that time, I can guarantee you, is for a buck. Now, I do believe that there's scrapes like that in November too. But in November, the majority of them are going to be to track does. But they also can be claiming a doe from a buck. It's kind of a marking, like this is mine kind of thing. Obviously, anybody who thinks they know everything about them is crazy. I don't know everything that's going on or what they're thinking or how or what's driving them to do it. I just know what I observe, and I observe that they use them for communication for bucks and for does for breeding, but they also use it to like claim an area or claim dominance or something. I mean, the scrapes that you find in September will be right where 2 buck trails cross coming out of bedding.
Okay.
And seeing that, I mean, I don't see where that could have anything to do with a doe. And I don't even think they're thinking about breeding at that time.
That's why I asked the question the way I did too. Like I said, not trying to stir anything up, just trying to understand. And a couple points on my end. One, John and I, we didn't talk about early season hunting at all. And I know he's a Michigan resident, so I'm assuming the bulk of his experience is after October 1st. What I saw last year was, there were some does in the area, but not a whole lot of them, but it was primarily bucks. And I know the stories that you've said, it's been mostly bucks. So maybe it's something to keep in mind for people that are listening, that the way I'm interpreting it or understanding it, a scrape in a bedding type area early season should definitely have somebody's attention, right? You'd agree there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, no, I appreciate your insight on that, because I think that stuff's pretty interesting. Like you said, you don't run into it too often, and that's the earliest I've ever found a scrape for sure. So if it wasn't for reading the stuff that you had out there and your experiences, I probably wouldn't have known what to make of that. Well, we talked about scrapes, Dan. Let's talk about rubs early season. And I guess from what I know about deer biologically, velvet generally comes off sometime between the last week of August and the first 2 weeks of September. So when you're scouting early season, let's go back to like boots on the ground, the season's open. You're out there and you notice everything, or you're trying to pay attention to the details. So you're looking for rubs, but what do those early season rubs tell you, if anything, when you find a fresh one in September?
Well, it tells you there's bucks around, and I don't think they're traveling long distances at that time of year. They're going from bed to food. So if the rub looks like it's off of a good deer, I think I'm in a good area, and I think that buck's around someplace. So then I'm going to concentrate on the bedding that's nearby. So specifically, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll check spots where I think they might be bedding, and I'll slip in there, and if there's no rubs, no sign or something, I'll leave. But a lot of times that sign, when you do find it in that opening week, here anyways, obviously you don't have no rubs September 1st and where you're at. Well, maybe you do. You got some deer that are probably hard antlered, but here most of them are hard antlered by the time the season opens. And if you find rubs, you know they're nearby. So I'm looking for a higher rub, and I'm looking in areas where I think that they're bedding in between the food and bedding. And then I don't necessarily go into the hunt area. I kind of look at the edge of the food area, so I don't spook the area, because I might want to come back and hunt that later on. So I kind of walk the field edge kind of thing and look at the sign going in and out. And if there's sign, then I'll move in for the kill, and I'll go in and I'll set out.
I think I know the answer to this, but I want to get your opinion. So it seems to me the early season rubs, like those September 15th hard antler to October 15th, they're different. They're not as aggressive. They're not usually, I'm just making generalizations here, even a big buck, it's not like a deep, aggressive, big tree rub. So are you looking at height specifically in the early season to give you an idea of a good buck?
Yeah, usually that's what I'm looking for, regardless of time period. I'm looking for height. The biggest difference is you just get more clusters of them around does or bedding towards rut. But even that, mature bucks are a different breed, and this depends on pressure. Because I've been on ranches where it's the opposite. But usually, like when I find a cluster of decent rubs, like a lot of rubs around a bedding area, it's a 2-year-old. The mature bucks just don't leave those clusters like that. They'll leave a rub here and there along their travels, and they'll mark crossings, like where doe crossings are and stuff like that, whether it's rut or not. But early season, a lot of times, some of the rubs will just have a few scratches. They won't even be worn to the bark. I mean, so you got to look a little closer.
That's why I was bringing that up, is because you're not necessarily again, go back to there's no always, but you're probably not going to see those really tall, like shredded rubs.
You see some like that early season, but not nearly as much as you do in October, right?
Right. So I guess pay attention more to the height and proximity to bedding as opposed to the impressiveness of the rub.
Yeah, I like to look and see if they're tacky, like if they're kind of still bleeding, meaning that they've been done within a day or so.
Okay.
So I know that there's something coming through there on a regular basis,
And then one last thing, and I guess I should have asked this question a bit earlier. We were talking about bucks and passing bucks, multiple bucks coming out of an area. So it sounds like you've had some experience with bigger bucks being in bachelor groups. What about, have you shot any or been on any that were just straight loners, even from early in the early season?
Yeah, a lot of them, because where I hunt, there's not a lot of big bucks, and they hang in their own age classes. So a lot of these bucks don't even have bachelor groups because they're by themselves. and just shine them alone. You get pictures of them alone, even during the summer. Not always. I mean, some of them do, some of them don't. And the bigger ones seem to break up faster.
And last question on that, bachelor groups versus loners. If you know a deer is with a group or a loner specifically based on your observations leading up to the season, does that impact your approach to hunting that deer at all?
Yeah, a little bit. The bachelor groups seem to bed more like those. They're in the same areas, but they kind of come up out of the primary bedding areas with the, good backdrop off the point and stuff, and they come up where the does would be, where you're generally setting up and kicking does out when you're setting up. You'll see the bachelor groups bed up in those areas when they're in groups, kind of like does do circle formation.
I want to restate that so I understand. So let's assume you're hunting a swamp point, and later on in the season, if you thought there was a buck out there, he might be bedded off the point in the red brush or whatever, but if I'm understanding correctly, the bachelor group might be right on the end of the point as opposed to into the brush more. Is that what you're saying?
So you ever go hunt a point and buck beds off of the point, and you walk in there, those jump up right in the middle of the point, kind of?
Yep.
You ever have that happen?
Oh, yeah.
I think most people have, right?
Yep.
Well, the does are bedded there because they're bedded in a circle all watching a different direction, and they're using each other to help. And bucks will kind of do that when they're bachelor bedding.
Okay.
They'll bed it as a group further out.
That makes sense.
At least that's what I've observed. I don't see that as much because I don't open September 1st, and I kind of stay out of their bedding areas. But when I have seen bachelor groups and jump bachelor groups in the woods, that's what I've observed. And you go over and you see the beds kind of like in doe formation. And in the same regard, you see those bed like bucks winter long. You see them bed right in, I've had cameras over buck beds, and, randomly all of a sudden a doe's bedding in there for a day. They'll bed right in the buck beds when they're alone. And bucks as groups, it seems to me, bed a little more like those do. Maybe not as much, but they do come up a little higher and stuff. And some of that maybe falls into less pressure at that time of year, and they got to be kind of pushed into those locked-in spots,
Right, those more secure locations.
Yeah.
That just sparked a question, and now this happened to me several years ago, probably 2016. I got access to a property in the summer, so I didn't have time. This was private land, so I didn't have time to scout it prior to the summer, the winter or the spring like I would have liked to. So I went in the summer, and I found an area that had a bunch of beds that I just instantly assumed was doe beds. And then the first time I hunted that property, it was October 1st or early on in October. A group of like 7 or 8 bucks came out of that, what I thought was doe bedding. So looking back on that now, let's say that was you in that situation. Was there anything that I could have done that might have clued me in that was actually a bachelor group bedding there as opposed to doe beds in the summer?
Probably nothing more than an observation. You probably have to see it.
Okay.
I mean, I get fooled by that stuff too. I mean, it's not like a magic or something.
Sure.
I've had some really good bedding that I found. I can remember this isn't that long ago, like 7 years ago or 8 years ago or something. I stumbled in some really good bedding, and I'm like, okay, this is where they're hiding and stuff. And I hunted it, and I just could not ever see or get it crack these bucks. It's like those beds are being used so much they had to be there. And there were several of them that were like that. And I started thinking back about all these past ones that were like that. And it intrigued me, and I put a camera over a few of them when I was done hunting, when I tagged out, and was shocked to find out they were night beds because they were set up just like day beds, but these bucks were coming in there, they're bedding at night. Some of that stuff you have to learn with a camera or something or an observation. And then on a property, it seems to repeat itself. But then again, I mean, if bucks bed like those when they're in groups, it might have been a doe bedding area, and they're just bedded in there. So maybe it takes more than one observation to really know for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Hard to say with my limited intel there. I had one firsthand sighting, and that was about it. What you just mentioned about the cameras and learning about the night beds, that's a perfect segue into my next question is, are you using trail cameras early season? Why or why not? And then as a follow-up to that, so are you using them? Why or why not? And if you are using them, what kind of intel are you trying to gather? Are you looking for inventory, or are you looking for something more tactical there?
I use trail cameras more for inventory or for to learn stuff for the future, like to learn what's going on in a spot. They're hard to get in time to kill intel without burning a spot. But I do use occasionally cell cams for getting kill intel. So I'll put them like on an island that has bedding off the points. And if a deer's showing up there in daylight, I know he's bedding off one of the points, and I try to move him for the kill when I see him. I'll put a trail camera over a small little food plot on Dave's farm and just see what happens for the whole year and learn what time periods those deer come, because it repeats itself every year. Like there's a food plot on Dave's farm that we put in right adjacent to this bedding area that I killed a lot of bucks there before there was even a food plot. We put this food plot right in the tangle, and then we just stay away, observe it from a distance. I mean, it's a tiny clover plot that's 20 feet across in the middle of a thick, nasty dogwood area with a bedding area adjacent to it.
That's the one where you ran into the 10-point that Dave ended up killing, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. That was a good video.
So anyways, we just sit back, we'd observe that and stuff, move in for a kill when we see them. But when I put a trail camera in there, what I learned, is looking at my kills, they were always in mid-October, mid to late October. And when we put a trail camera in there, sure enough, there's never a good buck there until that time period. There's like a 2-week period when that's a hot spot. They start coming in there around their rut and stuff and corral the does in that corner. And I didn't know that. I thought it would be an early season spot. So the cameras teach you things.
I was just going to say, it goes to show, and that gets talked about on the Beast a lot, is that timing, especially spot-specific timing, can be huge, because I can think back to 3 or 4 spots I hunted that were, one was only good early season, one's only good during the pre-rut, one's only good when they're full-on rut. So it's,
right.
Like you said, you can use cameras, you can use your observation, but it's really important, even if it's just mentally, to keep notes of that type of stuff. I think that's, and we talked about this in the first podcast, that's the marathon type approach that starts getting you consistent success as you gain intel over these spots over the years, because then spot A is only good then, spot B is only good then, and you start stacking up a bunch of good spots with good timing, and that's when you really start getting things done, I think.
Right.
One more thing on trail cameras. So let's assume that you weren't as busy as you are and that you just had infinite money. And what would your ideal or optimal early season trail camera strategy look like? I guess let's not say infinite money, but let's say you had 10 or 15 cell cams. How would you use those, and what would you do?
I would probably take the time to go and drop them in random swamps all over the place, and not necessarily the ones that I'm hunting already and know, which I think is a mistake people make. They put a camera where they're already going to hunt. They know they're going to hunt there. That's not to say you don't want intel on what's living there. But a lot of these people already know what's living there, and they just get addicted to pictures or something. I would put them in new swamps all over the place. I know a fella that's a Beast member, and I don't want to call him out because I don't know if he wants people to know this. But he drops cameras in swamps, not only in Wisconsin, but all across the Midwest. In states, you can just buy a tag over the counter, and then he just monitors the cameras and goes to wherever the biggest bucks are. And he does quite well.
Oh, I'd imagine that sounds like a pretty effective strategy.
Yeah, and I'd probably do something similar. It's just a matter of there's only so much time in this world, and I work for a living.
Sure. Getting ready to wrap this up. I said I'd only keep you an hour, and right in an hour. So 2 more questions. So I told you I'm still new to September hunting, and knowing that, what would you tell a guy in my position or a guy who lives in the state with an October 1st or later opener who's thinking about going on their first out-of-state hunt to early season opener like Kentucky or North Dakota where you got a September 1st opener? What would be your top 2 or 3 tips for someone in that situation to get, up their odds of success?
I would say I'd want to find out if there's acorns dropping there, and I'd contact somebody from that area and find out. And if there's acorns, I'd probably try and look for areas with isolated acorns, like swamps or something, where you can they're not bedding in the acorns. I think acorns are a huge tool for killing them, but they can also be a problem if they're in hills. So if there's no acorns, I would probably concentrate on areas that are adjacent to crops or something. Or I'd just go in there and dive in and do a lot of walking. I don't think I would sit back and predetermine spots based on maps. I think I would look at spots on maps, but I'd do a lot of walking and I'd spend the day walking, and I'd go back and hunt whatever spot looked the hottest. And then I'd creep into for the kill, and I'd repeat that every day. I think I wouldn't hunt mornings. I would just hunt evenings, and I'd spend the whole morning into the afternoon scouting, and then hunt the best spot.
Okay, that's good insight for sure. And then last question, Dan. The early season hunting, it's not too bad in Montana. When are we going to see Dan tackle the West?
Oh, is that an invite?
Yeah. You'll have to buy a preference point, and those are still available right now. Then you could probably get a tag next year, if not the following year. I know a place you might be able to stay real cheap.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, you might see me over there. I have hunted Montana, but it's been many, many years, and I hunted on a ranch.
Okay. I didn't know that.
I won a hunt.
Whereabouts in the state, you remember?
I probably know if I heard it. We're talking when I was like in my early 20s. I shot a real big 8-pointer, won a big contest, and first prize I got to pick between an elk hunt, a whitetail hunt, or a pronghorn hunt. And being an idiot kid addicted to deer, I chose whitetail. Montana river bottoms.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like at the base of the mountains, but it was all flat river bottom.
Well, that could be one of several locations. I'm not exactly sure. What about mule deer? Have you ever hunted mule deer? Any interest in that?
So on that trip, my tag was good for mule deer or a whitetail, and I came up on a mule deer driving down the street, or not driving to the ranch. You want to call it a street because the driveway to the guy's ranch house was like 10 miles long. I come around this corner and there's this mule deer standing out in the open looking at me. And I got out of the car and I got my bow out and I took like 10 steps to it and I figured it was 40 yards. And I put the 40-yard pin on it and watched the arrow hit the dirt about 6 feet from it. I paced it off. He was like 62 yards.
It's that's one of the hard lessons I've learned out here. It's very hard to judge distance with no landmarks because you'll find those deer with no trees, and a lot of times, and you're like, oh yeah, that's 60 yards, and then you range it, and it's like 95.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw a real big mule deer on that hunt too, but I've never really seriously gone after them. I've never done it.
All right. Well, after we wrap up here, I'll have to give you the info to get a preference point, and maybe next year you can try to draw a tag.
Okay. Be fun.
All right. Well, hey, Dan, appreciate you coming on. As always, a lot of good insight here today and taking the time. So looking forward to following along with you this season, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Good luck and stay safe out there.
All right. Good luck to you and everybody else listening.
All right, Dan. Thanks. Take care.